Rome ruled the world for 1,000 years, and the thing that finally killed it fit in the palm of your hand. It was not a sword, it was this, a coin. By the time Rome swallowed Egypt, it owned the entire Mediterranean. Every road, every sea lane, every harvest from Britain to the Nile fed one city. Rome called itself eternal, and for once, the arrogance almost seemed earned. No army on earth could beat the legions in the field. No rival even came close. So here is the puzzle historians still argue about, the one this whole story turns on. How do you kill an empire that cannot lose a war? You do not kill it from the outside. You let it kill itself slowly, in a way no general could see coming and no legion could defend against. And it all begins with the most trusted object in the Roman world, this coin, the denarius. For centuries, the denarius was almost pure silver. A soldier's wage, a loaf of bread, a merchant's whole fortune, all measured in it. From Spain to Syria, a Roman coin was trusted because everyone knew exactly what it was worth. Money is really just a promise, and for a long time, Rome's promise was good. But an empire that big is monstrously expensive. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers to pay. Roads, aqueducts, and free grain to keep the city mob fed and quiet. Games, temples, walls on 3 continents. Rome was the most expensive thing humanity had ever built. And here is the trap every emperor walked into. The income was basically fixed. Taxes, mines, the plunder of the last war. But the costs only ever grew. New wars, bigger armies, bigger bribes just to stay alive. Every emperor inherited a bill he could not pay. So one of them had an idea that looked completely harmless. What if you took the silver coin, melted it down, and mixed in a little cheap copper? You could strike more coins from the same silver, pay more soldiers. Same face, same name stamped on everyone. Who would ever notice? The Emperor Nero was the first to quietly try it. Around 64 AD, he shaved the silver down by just a few percent. A rounding error. The coin still looked exactly the same. Nobody rioted, nobody even blinked. And that is precisely the problem. It worked, because once one emperor got away with it, every emperor after him did too. It quietly became the oldest trick in government. Short on money? Do not raise taxes and start a revolt. Just make the coin a little bit worse and hope nobody does the math. Generation after generation, the denarius bled silver. Look at what 2 centuries of that actually does. Under Nero, the denarius was about 98% silver. 100 years later, barely 50. By the middle of the 200s, well under 50. And by 270 AD, the so-called silver coin was around 5% silver. A copper slug with a silver wash that literally rubbed off in your hand. For a while, people pretended not to notice. Then they noticed all at once. If the coin is worth less, you need more of them to buy the same bread. So prices climb, and the instant an entire society realizes its money is fake, the whole thing comes apart, and it comes apart fast. This is inflation, and Rome discovered it the hard way. Across the 3rd century, prices did not creep upward. They exploded. Some goods rose by 1,000%. In Egypt, the price of wheat multiplied more than 100-fold within a few generations. A lifetime of savings could turn into a pocket full of worthless metal. And now the poison reaches the one place an emperor truly cannot afford: the army. Soldiers were paid in denarii. So when the denarius became garbage, the soldiers had effectively taken a brutal pay cut. And unlike farmers, soldiers carry swords, and they know how to use them. So emperors had to raise army pay again and again just to keep up with the very inflation they themselves were causing, which meant striking even more debased coins, which made the inflation even worse, which made the soldiers demand even more. Rome had walked into a spiral with no bottom, and the soldiers learned the lesson of a lifetime. If the emperor depends on our loyalty, and our loyalty can be bought, then we do not really serve the emperor. We choose him. And whoever we can choose, we can also unchoose. What follows is called the crisis of the 3rd century, and it is almost hard to believe. In roughly 50 years, Rome ran through about 26 emperors. Almost every single one was murdered, most of them by their own troops, who killed for a bigger bribe from the next man in line. The throne itself had become an auction. The empire very nearly shattered for good. Whole regions broke away under their own emperors. plague swept through the cities. Barbarians, smelling weakness, pushed across every frontier at once. For a few decades, it genuinely looked like Rome was simply going to end, right there in the 200s. It did not end, not yet. A run of tough soldier emperors clawed the empire back together by sheer brutality. The strongest of them was Diocletian, a common general's son who seized power in 284 AD and decided he would fix the broken machine through pure force of will. He split the empire into halves and then quarters, each with its own ruler, so every border could be defended at once. He roughly quadrupled the bureaucracy and expanded the army. On paper, it was brilliant, but a bigger army and a bigger government cost even more money. And the money was still broken. He had treated the symptom and quietly fed the disease. So in 301 AD, Diocletian tried the most Roman solution imaginable. He issued an edict that simply commanded prices to stop rising. Thousands of goods, from wheat to lions for the arena to a day's wage for a painter. A maximum price fixed by law for the entire empire, all at once. And the punishment for charging one coin more? Death. It was the largest price control experiment in the ancient world. And it failed almost the instant it was carved. Because you cannot simply order inflation to stop. If it is illegal to sell bread for what bread now actually costs, then sellers simply stop selling. Goods vanished from the legal markets and reappeared in the black market at triple the price. The law did not stop inflation, it just deepened the shortages and turned every honest trader into a criminal, which forced the final admission, the one that quietly ends the whole story of Roman money. If the coins are worthless, then the government cannot even collect its own taxes in coins. So Rome stopped trusting its own currency. It began demanding taxes in kind, in grain and oil and cloth, and increasingly in forced labor. And to guarantee that labor, the state froze people in place. A law chained farmers to their land and sons to their fathers' trades. If your father was a baker, you would be a baker. If he worked that field, so would you, and your children after you. To save its tax base, Rome built a cage and locked its own people inside it. This is one of the roads that leads to serfdom. Notice what has quietly happened here. The great Roman economy, the coins and the trade and the markets that once tied a whole world together, is switching itself off. Rich landowners retreat behind the walls of self-sufficient estates. The long roads empty. The world stops using money and drifts back to trading things for things. The empire is still standing, but its heart has stopped beating. There was one final attempt to save the money. The Emperor Constantine minted a brand new coin, the solidus, in pure, honest gold. And it actually worked, for the people who could get their hands on it. The solidus became so trusted that it would go on to outlast Rome itself by centuries. But there was a catch, and it made everything worse. The gold coin was for the rich, the powerful, and the government. Ordinary people were still stuck with the garbage copper. So Rome effectively split into two economies, a gold world for the elite and a barter world for everyone else. The empire had turned its own inequality into currency. And the army, remember the army, the thing that started all of this. By the 400s, the emperors of the West simply could not raise enough real money to pay a real Roman army anymore. So they did the cheapest thing left to them. They hired the barbarians themselves as mercenaries to guard the border. Think about how insane that actually is. To defend Rome from the barbarians, Rome staffed its army with barbarians. And then, half the time, it still could not pay even them. An unpaid soldier with a sword is not a defender. He is a bill that has come due, standing armed inside your own walls. So when the famous sacks of Rome finally came, in 410 and again in 455 AD, they were almost an afterthought. The men who sacked the city were, in many cases, the very soldiers Rome had hired and then failed to pay. They did not smash through the walls of a mighty empire. They walked into the ruins of a bankrupt one. In 476 AD, a barbarian general did not even bother to name a new Western emperor. He just stopped. The last one was a teenage boy who was pensioned off and forgotten. There was no epic final battle. The Western Roman Empire did not fall. It was switched off because there was no longer any money to keep the lights on. So here is the answer to our puzzle. How do you kill an empire that cannot lose a war? You do not. You let it debase the one thing every part of it quietly depends on. Trust. Rome was never conquered, it went bankrupt. It slowly turned its own money into a lie, and an empire that lies to itself about what things are worth cannot survive the day it discovers the truth. This is the death no legion could defend against, the exact one the last chapter promised you. Not a sword from the outside, but a slow lie from within. The barbarians did not cause the fall. They were the undertakers, not the killers. Rome had been dying of its own money for 200 years before the funeral ever began, because money is not really metal. It is not paper. It is belief. A shared story that a token can be traded for something real tomorrow. An empire can survive lost battles and burned cities. What it cannot survive is the day its own people stop believing the story. Rome printed its way out of every crisis until the story itself was worth nothing. And Rome was not the first to learn this, nor the last. Nearly every great power that ever ran short of money has faced the very same temptation. Debase the coin, print a little more, promise everyone it will be fine. The face is stamped on the money change. The story it tells never really does. I will let you decide for yourself how familiar all of that sounds. Because the Romans were not stupid. They were not weak. They were an advanced, disciplined, brilliant civilization, and they walked straight into this with their eyes wide open. One reasonable-looking decision at a time. That is the genuinely unsettling part. But here is the twist that quietly undoes the whole idea of a fall. While the Western Empire went dark and broke, the eastern half, which was richer and crucially still using that honest gold solidus, did not fall at all. It kept the name. It kept the throne. It went on calling itself Roman for another 1,000 years. The empire we say fell in 476 had already moved its true capital east to a city called Constantinople, the New Rome. Its people never once called themselves Byzantines. That is a label modern historians invented long after they were gone. To themselves, they were simply Romans, and their empire was Rome, unbroken. So Rome did not die once, in a single dramatic year, the way we are usually taught. It died in pieces over centuries of several different diseases. The money was only the first of them, the slow rot that hollowed out the West. But 2 more deaths were already waiting in the dark. The second death was the one the money first set loose and then could never put back: the army itself. We watched the soldiers learn that they could sell the throne. That disease never once healed. From the day the legions understood that the empire belonged to whoever the swords obeyed, Rome stopped being ruled and started being auctioned. And that is a story with an enormous body count. And the third death is the strangest of all, because it is really a question. If the Eastern Romans spoke of Rome, ruled as Rome, and traded in Rome's gold for another full 1,000 years, then when exactly did Rome actually end? Maybe it never quite did. Maybe, in a sense, it is still ending, which brings this entire journey full circle. We began with an Egypt so old that the pyramids were already ancient ruins to Cleopatra. We watched it be swallowed by Rome, and now we have watched Rome itself begin to come apart, not with a bang, but with a shaved coin and a broken promise. Every empire believes it is the one exception. Not a single one of them ever is. The most powerful empire in human history was not brought down by a greater army. It was brought down by arithmetic, by the quiet, patient gap between what a coin claims to be worth and what it is actually worth. In the very end, Rome could conquer almost anything, except the truth about its own money. We have now watched the money die. Next, we push open the first of those 2 remaining doors, the army. The day Rome's own legions worked out that the empire itself was for sale, and the 50 years of murdered emperors that came after. The most powerful throne on earth sold to the highest bidder again and again, until there was almost nothing left to buy. That is the second death of Rome. Subscribe, so you are there when the legions put the empire up for auction.